everyone, this is IcicleFerret here to talk about the Limbo rework that launched on March 24th. Now, I'm probably a little late in getting this video posted, but I wanted to give Limbo 2.0 a fair shake by getting a good handle on his post-rework playstyle before giving my heartfelt opinions, rather than a knee-jerk reaction. Compared to his original build, there are a lot of differences that can be rather off-putting to the Limbo fan. The first annoyance I ran across was the inability to banish enemies into my plane of existence. This had been something absolutely fundamental to Limbo 1.0, and changing it has changed everything about Limbo. I could no longer pull one Bombard or Bursa to duel in the void. I must first send in a whole crowd and then follow them in. The second annoyance is that literally every offensive power of his is now AoE, from Banish to Rift Surge to Cataclysm. The Rift is supposed to be a sanctuary, not a free-for-all. If I wanted to run around to avoid enemy gunfire, I would be in the material plane, not the Rift. This directly relates to the third annoyance, which is the heavy reliance on stasis. It has become absolutely essential to his toolkit, and thus has taken the focus away from the Rift and put it squarely on freezing enemies in place. Limbo can literally not survive without this. When playing solo, there is probably nothing wrong with this, but it can be frustrating in parties as the enemy is still there, still being shot at, long after Limbo or his teammates have stacked enough damage to kill it. There's also the risk of shooting the spot where an enemy currently is, only for it to move after ending stasis, and the projectiles all miss. This is a major waste of time and resources. And finally, the last complaint I have about Limbo 2.0 is the terror left behind, after dodging into the Rift. I suppose it's for allies to follow you into the Rift if they so desire, but the terror is so small and lasts for such a short time, they have to be literally right behind you to take advantage of it. I've not had it happen personally, but I've also read accounts of enemies accidentally entering the Rift through these terrors as well. And this mechanic only serves to further require Limbo players to keep stasis up at all times, and literally nothing would be lost by removing it. I wish at this point I could give a better review for his Rift Surge ability, but it appears to be unreliable for unknown reasons. I tried to get Rift Surge to work with Banish, but the problem I kept having was that most enemies were simply dying upon the casting of Banish, and it wasn't like I was fighting level 10 weaklings either. These were level 35 plus enemies in derelict defense. The only ones that lasted long enough to be surged and then unbanished again were heavy Eximus units, and even then the result was underwhelming. Sure, there was that moment of joy when I first pulled it off successfully, but that wore off quickly. I could have achieved the same result by simply gliding out of the Rift and casting Banish again on my way back into it. Personally, the only way I use it is when enemies are in Cataclysm. When they pop out, they rebanish themselves, but the utility of this is rather limited, as exiting the Cataclysm will push Limbo back into the material plane, regardless of whether he was in the Rift when he entered. Also, the Banish cast by surged enemies is on a completely different timer than that of Cataclysm or any other manually banished enemies, so there is no way to keep track of who is going to emerge from the Rift and when. I know I may sound a little critical, but Limbo was something very near and dear to me. So, yes, I do feel a little sad now that he's gone. And he really is gone because Limbo 2.0 is a completely different Warframe. But that's not to say he doesn't have his likable points. He is way better at crowd control now than ever, something he was desperately lacking and which is practically required by Warframe's overall design. By stacking Stasis, Rift Surge, and Cataclysm, he can lock down a stationary defense target better than just about any other frame. Another upside is you now have the ability to carry objects such as data masses into the Rift and pick up items while inside Cataclysm. This change greatly cuts down on the ability for Limbos to troll their teammates. Limbo still excels at single-target attacks, and is probably even better at it now that he's able to stack damage from a whole clip of ammunition into one hit, or he can hold it helpless while chipping away at it bit by bit with melee attacks, without fear of reprisal. In addition, his ability to regenerate energy is phenomenal. Not only does just being in the Rift provide energy, but every time an enemy in the Rift is killed, he gains even more energy. This makes him perfect for channeling builds. After the update hit, and before I had a chance to really play him, Limbo 2.0 was all I could think about. I was practically anxious. What if I hated the changes? What if my beloved Limbo became something I couldn't stand to play? The answer to those questions turned out to be rather benign. I'd just find a new favorite frame. But what I learned most from the experience was just how attached I had become, not only to Limbo, but to Warframe itself. I had internalized Warframe. in that it was no longer just a game I played. It had become my game. Only the reality is that it isn't my game. It's Digital Extreme's game, and I am just a player. Once I let go of that ownership, I was much more at peace with the changes DE had made. In the end, I'm left wondering if what changed so much wasn't really Limbo himself, but rather the community's knowledge of him. This rework has brought Limbo into the spotlight and taught many players how to deal with his rift. Some of the most fun I've had was to maintain stasis and Cataclysm while a Mesa stood atop the defense target and blasted everything with her peacemakers, or a World on Fire Ember slowly burned everything to death, the two of us only leaving the safety of the rift to gather resources dropped by slain enemies. The new changes have no doubt brought Limbo 2.0 into better alignment with the overall theme of Warframe, one versus many rather than one versus one. But, in doing so, Limbo has lost a lot of what made him unique. He's become yet another crowd control frame. Only with Limbo 2.0, the CC you do can actively inhibit the abilities of your teammates. Having a dozen enemies banished in the rift, either in stasis or not, prevents other players from interacting with them and impedes their ability to contribute. It's not impossible for them to kill rifted enemies, but overall, the rift still isn't very conducive to group play. Even with these changes, I highly doubt Limbo will be anything more than mastery rank fodder to most players. His abilities, while highly effective in the hands of a skilled player, still come across as rather gimmicky and difficult to execute. Well, that's about all I have to say on the matter. I hope you guys are enjoying the new frame just as much as I am, and no, I'm not talking about Octavia. Thanks for listening to me ramble, and I will see you all next time.